Okay, welcome, thanks for joining us to yet another LGBT panel sponsored by Prism Comics, and no, we're not done yet. We're going to discuss and bring in on how it works, the Prism's Queer Press grant, and every year since 2005, Prism has awarded grants to foster LGBT creators and new projects or projects that are in development and need a boost. And the grant has been funded by donors, fans who want to see this work get out there. One who can't be with us right now, who's been a major donor all along, that I want to acknowledge and thank up front, is Paige Braddock of James World Enterprises fame. But this year, and I'll talk a little bit at the end about how, starting last year, but definitely this year, y'all are welcome to help out. Use our friend the Facebook Causes page to do so. My name is Roger Clarice. I am Publications Chair and a past president of Prism. Before I introduce everybody, I just want to we thank Rich Johnson of Bleeding Cool for this fabulous anti-Westboro Baptist t-shirt, and following the URL in my midsection, I think you can ask him about getting your own. All right, Rich. So I'd like to start by saying a little bit about the panelists, and then asking them to introduce themselves and say a little more, and to describe the project. Well, for those who are grant recipients, describe the project and for which they received the grant. So up first is the father, mother, midwife of Glamazonia, the Uncanny Super Trainee, as well as Prism's publication, talent and industry chair, Justin Hall.
Hello. So I'm now actually helping administer the grant, but I did win it a few years back, tied actually with Tommy Roddy, who does Pride High. And I got it to do my book, Glamazonia, the Uncanny Super Trainee. I also do other kinds of comics as well. I do a series called True Travel Tales, which are autobiographical and biographical travel stories. Also an erotic series with Dave Davenport called Hard to Swallow, and some other kind of, different kinds of projects. So I have my hands in a bunch of different strange little comics. But Glamazonia is the book that I got the grant for. This is one iteration of it. There's more to come. So.
And the man who brings you World of Love, Ed Luce.
I received the grant actually this year. I was a co-recipient with Eric Warner, the second set of co-recipients for my comic book Oath. I had proposed to collect the series for a hardbound. I'm sorry, not a hardbound, a perfect bound, something that I can put in bookstores and online, sort of more readily. And I mean, I've also published little sort of mini comics that are based on the Oathverse, as I call it, the sort of broader cast of characters, in addition to t-shirts and all sorts of swag and things like that.
The recipient of the very first Queer Press grant. God, I'm making you sound old.
I'm old school.
Just old school.
Is there indoor plumbing back there?
Steve McKay.
I was a recipient of the first one in 2005. It sounds insane that was that long ago, but I did it for the first issue of my series, Shirtlifter. The first edition of it, actually, this is a brand new edition that I just put out this year, slightly revised and with a color. But Prism fronted me the money to do at least half the cost of the initial print run 5 years ago. And so I've done 3 issues since then. And the way sort of indie comics finances work, a pyramid scheme is not exactly the right analogy, but it's like any money you make on the first one goes into printing the bills on the second one, because distributors and bookstores will take like up to years to pay it sometimes. So the cash flow is always a bit of an issue. So getting a bit of a jump start on that whole process was really instrumental in helping me be a sustainable self-publisher.
And last and way not least, the founding president of Prism Comics. He writes smartly because he publishes Northwest Comics. He slices, he dices, he even makes julienne fries. Charles Zane Christensen.
I did want to mention that if you have one of these fancy phones, turn it to silent so it doesn't do this. Although that's a great tune. Just go ahead and put those to silent. So
It was better for the Wonder Woman.
Actually, if you have that ringtone, you can leave it on. Otherwise, yes, as Roger said, I'm the founding president of Prism. I've been involved with Prism since 2003, actually even before that, when we were under the auspices of Andy Mangel's publication Outing Comics. And so write and co-created the Mark of Aeacus, which is published by Class Comics and now co-published by my own company, Northwest Press. And Northwest Press has its first edition of a graphic novel, which is John Macy's Tony and Camille, an adaptation of an erotic Victorian novel attributed to Oscar Wilde. And I'm also working on a Glamazonia book in the holiday season, for the holiday season with Justin Holmes. It's great to be here.
So aptly, I think, first question for Zan, because this precedes my being there. When I joined Prism, the first year of the grant process was actually underway. So how did it start? How did the idea come together?
Well, I'm like more ambitious than I have that I have good sense. I don't know how to say this. I'm way ambitious and very optimistic. And so when we started Prism, it grew out of the desire to do something in addition to an annual publication that spotlighted the work of LGBT creators. And one of the things that was always kind of on our plate to want to eventually get to was a grant. And I'm not exactly sure what lit the fire under us to get it done just then, but I do know that we started out with a very modest amount. And we're like, well, let's just do what we can do now, because we're all volunteer. There's no salaried employees at Prism. We're all volunteers. We're all community supported. But we were able to kind of eke out a little bit of money to do a grant. And just at that time, we started talking about it in earnest. We got an anonymous donor to step in, and was that we had the anonymous donor? Was it? I'm going to say who was,
There is no statute of limitations.
That sounds right to me. We got that, and then Paige came on as well, and so we were actually able to do a larger grant initially than we planned on. And then the grant has kind of steadily grown ever since, because I think people recognize that its direct impact. It's really helping people that readers want to see their work published. Other creators want to see their work published because it kind of lifts all boats. You know, the more popular we can make gay comics as kind of a genre or a niche market in comics, the better off we all are. And so it kind of just started from the very beginning. We wanted to do it. And at some point, we just kind of hit critical mass with our funding and just pulled the trigger.
And as I said, last year was the first year we used the Facebook page.
Yes, and that was actually great. We, if you've been on the Prism website, you've seen the Facebook page, you've seen the little donor thing, and we. It looked really impressive for a while because it was showing last year's donations in addition to this year's. But we have a new WordPress 2010 grant fund drive going now. So spread the word, link it, tell your friends. Yes.
So Steve kind of alluded to this, but we'll talk a little more about the process in a bit. But there's definitely, you have to tell us not just that you want the money, see here's my work, but give us an idea both in terms of business planning, marketing planning, and just pretty deeply about the project format, how you want it to come out. And then, the big dirty secret is that Joseph Heller, the author of Catch-22, in one of his other books, the recurring phrase was "nothing succeeds as planned." So it doesn't mean, nothing succeeds. Things go great, but often the way things happen aren't exactly the way you documented the plan for doing it. So one of the things I want to ask, and start with Steve, and then Ed and Justin. So here's the money. What did you say you were going to do with it, and what went just a little bit differently? Because we know, still it conformed and was a really effective use of the grant. I want you all to freak out that, not to freak out, sorry, that, you start on this and then you figure out there's a better way on the project to use it, that we're going to come down and, empty your pockets and slap you around a little, which, if we're into it, okay, but anyway, Steve.
I guess it depends on, technically what I used the money for, my first purchase was a large format printer that I used to make 13 by 19 prints that I then sold at Tom of Finland so that I actually had more money. So it's kind of like a little bit of an in and out with it. So the cost of printing the first run of the first issue was $1,800 and the grant was $1,000. So it all kind of trickled to there, either directly or indirectly. But my issue didn't come out until I think April or May of 2006. And I got the money in September, and I had these art fairs that I'd never exhibited at before, and I needed something to show people. So I got the idea of doing cards and prints. And so it helped fund some, I guess, for lack of a better word, publicity materials. But in terms of the actual plan that I submitted, the only thing that changed was my long-term plans rather than my short-term. I put out an individual comic book size publication, which is what I said I was going to do. The only thing that changed is that I thought I was going to do it as a pamphlet series, like 24 pages every, 3 times a year, something like that. And the alternative comics market really changed, and doing individual pamphlet staple format is really, really unsustainable in the direct market. And the bookstore distribution was really difficult with that as well. So I switched up to a perfect bound format for issues 2 and 3, and I'll continue that in the future. So that's about the only thing I really changed from the original plan. But the market really did change a lot. It has changed a lot from 2005, quite radically, especially for self-publishers. It's really a lot more difficult to get distribution now.